I'm excited. Here we go.
We're live again.
We are.
Welcome to the Business Velocity through the 5 Facets of Business podcast. We're your hosts, Dave Newell, Hannah Panuski. With our guests, we explore actionable insights and share stories of real businesses. Whether you're a startup or a seasoned business leader, understanding how to harness the 5 facets of your business will help you propel your growth and achieve business velocity. Hannah, who do we have the pleasure of speaking with today?
We are speaking with one of my honestly favorite people. I spend a lot of time with her and I love working with her team. We're speaking with Jena Gribble. She is the CEO and founder of indie-fav branding and marketing studio, Blush Cactus. They are based in Phoenix, Arizona, in the metropolitan Phoenix, Arizona area. At Blush Cactus, Jenny, oh my gosh, she should slap me for that. Jena brings almost 20 years of experience in branding, marketing, print, and digital direction and design to her work. She has helped dozens of companies from small businesses to multimillion-dollar organizations build badass brands. She's a StoryBrand Certified guide, and Jena guides her clients to stand out and inspire trust with authentic, consistent brand messaging through every customer interaction in her platform. And now let's bring onto the stage Jena Gribble. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So excited to be here with you guys.
Hi, Jena.
I'm not going to kill you for calling me Jenny. Don't worry. It was a Freudian slip.
Yeah, I was like, we can edit live streams, right?
How ironic that I actually butcher my friend's introduction when usually I'm pretty smooth at it, but
you're totally good.
Trained actress, multiple read-throughs,
obviously not doing very well.
It's still a good
it's unpolished, which is, that's how it is, right? Not everything is perfect. So we're good.
That is how it is, Jena. I'm glad you brought that up. Welcome to the stage. Jena's a good friend and longtime kind of partner, collaborator in working with clients. She is our go-to designer and marketing agency. We like to throw some clients your way, in part because you just do killer work. You did our website. You did a lot of the logo, the branding as we built out the 5 facets and just crushed it. So we're excited to have you on the podcast today. And you're just fun to work with, I mean, if nothing else, it's just a good time. We have a good time when we hang out. So looking forward to having you on the show. Why don't you just give us, 2 minutes on how you got into the work you do, and then maybe share something fun of like, as an agency owner, what's the biggest obstacle you're facing right now?
Okay. Well, how did I get into doing this? I am one of those weirdos that's still doing what I went to college for, which I don't know if there are very many of us out there anymore. Like most of us have like identity crisis and change gears. But I started out as a graphic designer, only a graphic designer. And then as I kind of worked corporate and then went out on my own, I have gone from freelancer to business owner to, sometimes it still feels weird putting on the hat called entrepreneur, but I suppose that fits too. And now we actually have a team. So I've gone from, just being little me in this business to managing a team and scaling an agency and, going from just graphic design services to strategic branding and marketing and all of the things. So strategy plus tactics when it comes to, helping businesses put their best foot forward. So, and then what was the second question?
A big obstacle you're facing as an agency leader.
Yeah, I would say it's an interesting transition going from the person who does all the things and has all of the stuff in your own head and then having to build processes and systems around that so that you're not the person who has to be in the weeds all the time. I think any person who's scaling from beyond their self, that's probably one of the biggest challenges. So, and then, I think that the obstacle is me, honestly. I'm like, I love so much about all the parts of what we do. I can't get my fingers out of it. So I think that's probably my biggest struggle just in general.
Yeah, you're 100% not alone there. I mean, one of our kind of target audiences, so to speak, is exactly where you are, right? Like it's that transition from doing the things yourself, getting yourself to, let's say, $1 million or 2 million or 3 million or whatever that kind of number is, just by scrapping, doing the work. And in order to scale, you can't repeat yourself over and over again, and you can't sustain the amount of things that are coming your way. I think that's really true, but I also think it speaks to something you mentioned in the intro. And I actually have this conversation with folks enough, and I can't imagine how many times you have this conversation, is the difference between strategy and tactics when it comes to marketing materials, right? Like I would imagine when a lot of folks come to you, they're like, hey, I need a website. Hey, we need social media content. Hey, we need whatever. And they're viewing that as like a strategic thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to me, that's a tactic. Like that's a tool in which you use your strategy. And so you mentioned that on the front end, and I know you've helped us strategically, you've helped a lot of people strategically and tactically. How do you distinguish between the two? How would someone, if they're thinking about updating their website, or they're thinking about some of the things that trigger that, oh, I should really be working with somebody to help out with our marketing. How do you kind of distinguish between the two, and what should somebody be paying attention to?
That's a good question. I think the thing that people start with tactics because it's the tangible thing that they get to see and take away at the end of the day. So it's like, oh, most of the time when businesses are, it's usually an inflection point, like a fork in the road. Either we're pivoting or sales are down, or there's something that's triggering the need to reevaluate what's going on the inside, or even what we're displaying as what's on the outside, And so I think that's when business owners start to wonder, like, is our marketing working? Are we even doing any marketing? Have we put any effort into that? Is our website communicating what it needs to? And I think a lot of times people will just be like, X thing is outdated, or we haven't paid attention to this in so long. And so the easy answer, the quick fix, is to fix the thing, right? It's like, oh, our website hasn't been updated since 1997. It's really bad. And so we're like, okay, that's obviously a problem. We need to fix that. And the questions that I ask obviously are like, well, what's causing this urge to do the thing, fill in the blank, the tactical thing that will make you feel better, hopefully get you the results you're after. And usually it's one of those things, like sales are down. We no longer, we're different now than we were before. And then I'm like, okay, well, then we need to back up the train so that the thing, after we're done with the thing, whether it's a rebrand, a logo redesign, or a website redesign, or even if you're going to be putting a marketing campaign out there, you want to make sure that you're first looking under the hood and you're like, okay, what is it that do we have all of our ducks in a row? Do we know what we want to communicate? Have we switched who our customer is? Are we merging into an untested area of the business? And that is where I really start to, poke the bear a little bit and try to figure out what, angle we need to go at. Because if you just jump straight into tactics and you go to like a website redesign or something and you're still talking to the old demographic, you're just going to get the same stuff. So really the outcome is dependent on the strategy. You can't, you can't have one without the other.
I really like that distinction, right? The tactic is building a website, doing social media, updating your logo, those types of things. But I like the connection between the strategy. The strategy informs the outcome, right? I think that's actually really powerful. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so then do you recommend, or in your experience, does it work out better when a company focuses on revamping or breathing new life into the tactical pieces when they're experiencing success, or when things are hard? Like, do you see a difference in how the product comes out, if the marketing brand strategy comes out better when the company is successful, or when they're struggling and they're trying to take a new direction?
That's actually a really good question. I think both situations can have a good outcome. I think if you're riding the wave of success into a rebrand, the angle that we go at it is a little bit different. It's almost like you're putting your problem solving hat on for different things. And so it's like, how do we keep the momentum going forward if you're on the success train, if that's how things are going? And then it's almost like you have to be even more careful because you don't want to crash what's going on. You don't want to like, there are so many companies that are like, hey, we did so great in this one thing. And so we're going to do a spinoff and we're going to we're going to do this thing over here and it's going to be just as good. And then it crashes the thing that was so good over here because they completely forgot about nurturing what was already bringing them success. So I think you need to be wise and careful when you are riding the wave of success and you do want to pivot into new things or switch gears. And then when you're struggling, when there's like, like I said, if there's, hey, our demographic has changed or our sales are down or whatever, that almost can be a little bit easier to diagnose and move forward with in terms of like, then we pick a direction and we move forward and we make sure that we can, strategically and soundly go onto better, sunnier days. Right. So I think you have to be a little bit more cautious when things are great. But I don't think that there's like I wouldn't say it's, either or. I would say that most businesses probably are going to be having that internal dialogue or that conversation or that introspection when things are not going so great. I think it's or they're having some sort of struggle, some sort of pain point, just like most of us in our stories. Like we're not looking for solutions until we have that rub of some kind. And so that I would say like 80% of the companies that we work with are having some sort of minor identity crisis or, desire for more,
What would you recommend they do? I mean, let's imagine it is a company that is having a time of struggle, perhaps it is an identity crisis, and maybe it is that they're looking for a company like yours. Maybe the question is, what would you love for your future clients to do now before they even approach working with, a branding agency?
Yeah, I mean, data is always a good thing to have. So if you have a pulse on your business, there are many business owners that are kind of that fly by the seat of their pants, and there's no judgment on that. I am definitely one of those people too. Exactly. Exactly. I'm like, what? I have to look at, you want me to go in QuickBooks? Ew. I'm a creative. Numbers are not, the maths isn't my thing. But I think having some data, like, having a starting point is good to have in order to be able to bring something to the table. But I would say, having an open mind and looking for somebody who you really can trust to take your hand and guide you along the way versus save you from yourself is really important. The last thing I want to do is be responsible for making or breaking somebody's company, So I think it's like the engagements that we have the most success on are the clients that are extremely open-minded and they have a little bit of data, like they have their Google Analytics, they have maybe they know a certain thing that happened that they tried and it just kind of made things just not go great. But I think an open mind and a little bit of foundational data coming into it is what we would probably require. The other thing too is I think when I'm having conversations with folks who are like, oh, we don't have, I actually had a conversation on a sales call the other day where they were like, do you ever work with companies who are just like, really confused or they feel like really scattered, they're not as organized in the front end. They kind of have all of this like stuff going on like we do. And I said, everyone. I feel like that's everybody. But that it was funny that they thought that they were the exception, that they felt like they were a hot mess and that I work with companies that are less messy.
Right.
So I think being transparent too is a big one too. Bringing transparency and trust into the engagement is going to help for a better outcome. Because if you're hiding stuff or if like there's no judgment, if there's something where you're like, oh gosh, I have people come in all the time. Don't look at my website. It's so embarrassing. Like I can tell, I can almost guarantee you I've seen or heard worse.
Yeah,
So
exactly. It's interesting. Coming back to this data piece real quick, because I think it is really important. I mean, one of the things we promote in any company we work with is, hey, you just have to have data. Like, you just have to know what's happening. You just have to understand what it is and set some targets around it. Of course, those targets, are somewhat arbitrary, but we also talk a lot about how data in and of itself is just numbers. It's the story that surrounds it that matters, right? So for example, we could say, 1,000. People are like, I don't know what that means. What do you mean by that?
Right.
Like, well, it's just a number. Sure, we're looking at the number, but I want to know, like, well, what does 1,000 mean to you? Well, it could be, well, we're getting 1,000 hits to the website a week. And for some, that might be like, holy crap, that's amazing. And for others, that might be super disappointing, right? So it's like, it's something to look at the numbers. It's another thing to then tie the numbers to the strategy to kind of pull that first part in, to be able to say,
Mhm.
okay, so the numbers teach us something. They give us a baseline in which to operate from. But let's also then tie the strategy to that. So for example, instead of 1,000 hits to the website, we might say, hey, we want 1,000 leads a year. That's our target. That's the thing we're shooting for. Jena, how do we do that? Okay, now we can actually work with each other to figure out, well, where are you now? What's the data that you have now? Where can we take that? And we often see the data kind of pulls two things forward. It helps us think strategically, but it also helps us identify and address those issues, right? Like, where is the pain? So to your point, when people come, and even in our own business, I mean, we've started looking at the numbers every week, and sometimes it's like, yeah, they're totally great, in line with what we were thinking, and sometimes it's not, and it helps to pull out, like, okay, well, where are we experiencing that pain? And part of the reason why I'm kind of continuing this conversation is, I think when you pay attention to those things, you can act before something becomes a fire, right? Like, if you're
Yeah.
not paying attention to the data and you're not seeing something, it's like, well, the farther you get away from whatever that target was, and if you're not tracking that data, pretty soon it's like that thing's on fire. But if I can
Yep.
deal with it when it's a flame versus a fire, I can really do something about it. So to kind of pull that long piece full circle into a question, what are some of the, you've kind of given some examples of the fires that people are in, like, our website's embarrassing, we can't even look at it. What are some of the flames that you might see? Like, what are some of the indicators that show up for folks where it's like, all right, maybe now is the time to start doing something before it becomes a huge problem. We have to spend, 40 grand redoing everything. Like, how do,
Mhm.
how do people even kind of maintain, develop on go, right?
Yeah, it depends on the type of business, but I can speak for maybe like some of the companies that we work for regularly. There's symptoms, right, that come through usually before you can see hard data. And I would say too, data is really important. And then there's also people who are obsessed with data, and it's almost like destructive. So there's that balance of like we need to pay attention to the numbers, but we don't want to be so consumed by them that paralyzes us or it just makes us like a slave to it either.
Yeah.
So, but I think the symptoms are some of the things that happen first. So, one of the big ones is, this is just an example. We're attracting the wrong people. We keep
Mm,
having sales conversations with people who are not qualified leads. And that could be because the people who, you would want to then pull back and go, okay, what are your lead sources? Are you doing ad campaigns that are pulling in and talking to the wrong people? So that could be, if you follow that thread, if you swim upstream, you're looking at, okay, the messaging there is targeting the wrong folks.
yeah.
Maybe you have old relationships who are used to you doing something the way that you used to do it, and you now have changed your strategy, or you've now evolved your strategy, which as brands and businesses do. And they're sending you leads word of mouth that are just not a good fit. And so I think like that symptomatically, it's like, okay, well, if that's the thing where you're like, okay, I'm having a lot of like I'm wasting so much of my time on sales calls or having conversations with leads that are just not good for us. That's an example of one symptom where it's like pretty soon that's going to turn into hard data because your sales numbers are going to go down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like an example of where the symptom is like, or even the gut feeling. I think I think some people think that data and gut feeling they're separate, but they're really not. I think the gut feeling comes first, and just like the symptom does, and then the data will follow. You'll kind of fall down a spiral of, okay, well, maybe I should have listened to my instinct of we're attracting the wrong folks. And so then when we're branding and messaging and marketing comes in, is then just pulling back and saying like, okay, what is the message? What are you saying? Is there something that we could be saying better, differently? Did you raise your prices? And now this certain customer segment is no longer a segment you can serve. You have to move to talking to a different ideal customer. So that's one example, just a quick off the top of my head.
Yeah, it is interesting because there is the gut feeling. There is that like your spidey sense goes off as a business owner, as a business leader, where you're like, man, something just isn't feeling right, or like you kind of get this thing that I don't know. Yeah, I mean, spidey senses maybe that like
I like spidey sense. I
that,
agree.
like, that tingly awareness of like, yeah, something's just off here. And I think then that's almost always followed by like assessment, discovery, like, okay, I should dig in and figure this out, like what's actually happening. And you kind of lean in. And it's interesting because I think maybe the third part of that journey is confusion, uncertainty, because there's choices now that you have to make, right? Like even when you get the data, sometimes like, hey, our marketing isn't working the way it's supposed to be working, or we're not getting the leads that we need to get, or we're not closing the deals we need to get, or our team is falling through on or failing to follow through effectively. Like you start to see these things, and now all of a sudden it's like sometimes the answer is just like, oh, I know we got to do this and we can fix it ourselves, and sometimes we can't. And so I think there is this like uncertainty, ambiguity piece that shows up for business leaders. It's why, if we all just had the answers and they were easy, we'd all be crushing it and vacationing most of the time. But it's not the case, right? Like there's a million decisions that you can make, and so you have to have a tolerance for ambiguity as a business leader, and then know where to go, right? So like you've been a long-standing partner and friend. We've known each other for a few years at this point in time. And like there is a little bit of a community aspect to this of like, all right, you call people, people, etc. If like how do you leverage your own network as an agency owner, as a business leader? Like how do you lean into your own network to support you in those times of uncertainty?
I would say, as somebody who by my very nature shies away from risk, so that's one of my biggest, when I say entrepreneur, feels like a name I can't really embrace, because I'm like, oh, they love to just jump right in and throw caution to the wind and just do the things. I'm definitely risk averse. So I would say that as a leader, and this has gotten easier, honestly, the more risks I've taken and the more I've proven to myself that risks can pay off. Like if you have the gumption to move forward with a gut feeling and you put enough energy into it and you keep reevaluating, you will succeed. The only failure is stopping, really. I have to lean on that network heavily. Like, for example, I know with the 5 facets, we went through that with you and Hannah, and that was some of the most insightful work that I've ever done on the agency, because there were things that, what's that saying? The cobbler's children have no shoes, or whatever, that overused cliche. Yeah. It just says it so well. So why come up with something different? There were so many things I hadn't thought about. Like a lot of what we do, Dave, we do a lot of the work we do kind of can overlap. I'm like, man, you're really good at branding, Dave. And so I'm like, these are things that I just hadn't thought about, for my own agency. And I always tell people it's really hard to read the label from the inside of the bottle. So having that support system of, people like Hannah, who are really good at being objective and organized and seeing holes where things, I'm blind to it. It's my blind spot. And people like you, Dave, who are like so strategic and can really ask the right questions and pull the right answers out of, somebody like me who's, maybe having a little bit of a struggle to figure out what the next step is. And that just goes, I have coaches, I have support systems and things like that, and other people who, it's lonely at the top as business owners. So if we don't have if we don't leverage the network that we have and the people who, are adjacent to what we do and have expert advice, and, whether you engage with them on a professional basis or you can just pick up the phone and be like, hey, I'm having a mild crisis. Can you help me? I wouldn't be where I am today without those folks.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't. Like, I think I'm not here to, not just because I'm on your podcast, to toot your horn, but I will say that
We'd like to lean in and say this is not a paid promotion.
it is not.
We really appreciate it and genuinely appreciate
But
it.
I will say that, like, some of the most thought-provoking work that that's happened in the last year came from some of the questions that you asked. So, like, it was just, invaluable, truly, to make those relationships with people who are so good at what they do, and they can, and just lean into that, because it's it's priceless, truly.
Yeah.
Yeah. This conversation has really danced around that question of just like, what do you do in times of struggle? What do you do in times of success? And, how you survive as an agency leader. And I think overall, you can't do it alone. Like, you have to have the people around you that you trust and that you have faith in their ability to do what they do best. It doesn't have to be the same as what you do, but you build this trusted community of folks, and you call them when you need them, when things are good, when things are bad. And then there's all the other stuff that you could do during either of those times as well. But no matter what, you need other people in order to succeed as an agency owner.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really cool too is, if they're, as far as leveraging that network, I can go to Dave or Hannah and say, hey, we need this, or I have a client who needs this. And I know that based on your expertise and the things that you do well, you're going to serve up some pretty awesome relationships in return. And so it's almost like you continue to grow your network of experts, and then it's easier to trust the folks who then can lead you through the answer, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to just, it's there's so much value. And it's funny, they always say that, like, you can't scale a business on word of mouth. I heard that so many times when I was in EOA. But I'm like, I don't know. I feel like that is the most like, it's just so valuable to have those relationships, and to be able to go into those engagements, like people who, for example, want to work on their branding and marketing, or they have some sort of friction point in their business. And the people who come to me from Dave, or, whoever else, they've got like that established trust already baked in. And so those relationships, I think, are just so important and helpful.
Absolutely. But I will say, you're also ready for them. I think that one thing that I respect and love so much about you as a business leader is, the value of strong processes and making sure that your team knows what's expected of them when the leads do come your way. And so, so I think it's, success is luck meets preparation. So what I'm hearing and what you're saying is, success as an agency owner is relationships plus preparation.
Oh, yes. Like, I would say the relationships that you build, and the community aspect of it is the first piece. And then you have to take it the rest of the way, right? Like, you will make or break, whether it's my agency or anyone else's business out there. You have to take the baton and you have to run it to the finish line, and a success, you have to make that successful outcome for the people who you're working with. Otherwise, and you do that with all of the prep work, right? Yeah. And that's kind of goes full circle back to, like, what is your struggle? Taking all of that stuff and putting it on paper and making awesome processes and organization, and that equals good customer experience. And they're going to be like, yes. And then, the train keeps going. They're going to be like, hey, they were really organized, and I've had really bad experiences in the past, and this was just so good. So I think, yes, it's almost like the alchemy of all of these. If you're making a loaf of bread or something, you've got all the ingredients that make a good loaf of bread, and not like a flat, stale, nasty, crusty piece of bread.
Yeah, like something yeah, that's pretty funny. It's interesting because I actually loathe at times the narrative of like the self-made leader company, like these unicorns that are like, oh, they're led by this like amazing person, and they make it very individual. And it's like, I think that's such a farce, and I think it's such a dangerous thing to promote. because there's a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a lot of people that I've met that it's all about like the hustle, the grind, like I got to pull myself up by my bootstraps. And it's like, sure, but that is a pretty good recipe to burn out. It's a pretty good recipe to never achieve the thing that you want to achieve if you think you have to do it all by yourself. Like I think it's actually a pretty dangerous story that gets told. We want to lift up this one person that's such an amazing human. It's like, yeah, well, that amazing human was surrounded by a heck of a lot of other amazing humans that aren't getting the credibility and aren't getting the statement that they're getting. I think that's actually pretty unfair to all the people that are happening around them. And I get you can't do, societal stories about the 100 people that made the thing happen. I get that too. But I do think it is like a lot of entrepreneurs that we meet do feel lonely. They feel that sense of isolation, but I also think it's almost like a self-quarantine, right? It's like, it doesn't have to be that way. You can easily reach out to other entrepreneurs that you're meeting and knowing. And one of the things that we like to do is, if we meet some entrepreneurs who are like, I'll often ask the question, like, are you engaging with other entrepreneurs? Like, do you know other people who are entrepreneurs? And if the answer is no, it's like, great, here's an email with 5 connections. Like, these are amazing people. You should know these people. Like, just know these people. Because to your point, Jena, I mean, we connected, 3 years ago at this point in time? And I've known so many more people because I know you and I know vice versa. And it's like all boats rise, right? Like that's this kind of small business entrepreneurial ecosystem that we can participate in. And I think, it can feel isolating, but I think I also feel a sense of responsibility because I've been blessed by so many people who have connected me to so many amazing people. Like I wouldn't know you without somebody who connected me to somebody who connected me to somebody, right? So it's like, I think there's an obligation that we have as entrepreneurs to unite, to weave everybody together and to shift that narrative from, the one person who created the one amazing thing to, no, it's a web of people that actually were involved in this. Nobody does this alone.
I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, I agree. I think it also says a lot about you as a leader when you are telling your story, and who was involved in getting you to the success. I think I've been on a few podcasts this year, and most of the time I'm just raving about my team.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, don't talk about me. Like I'm just the person here who's being the face of this thing for now. And the real glory goes to the folks who are making the things happen, the Hannahs and the Annas and the Jills and everybody and Aaron and everybody on my team who's just amazing. And so I think, the true leaders are the ones who can let their team shine through their story too, And I also despise the hustle culture and the lone wolf, self-made. Nah, everyone has a little help from their friends somewhere.
Everybody does. I mean, I love that. I often say, we've built out the 5 facets over the last couple of years. We've built up products, and I can honestly say we'd be a third as far as we are if Hannah wasn't driving everything all the time, right? If there wasn't somebody who was pushing the ship and making it happen, like we wouldn't be half as far as we are. And so it is like the people who care, who follow, who connect, who support, who push makes it possible. But, I'm often the face of it, or I'm the one that gets associated with it, which is fine and okay. But to your point, it's like, it's not me, it's us. Mm-hmm. It's always an us story when you're building something as an entrepreneur. And I think it's important to keep that message true. And it's also, I know I said before the show that I didn't want to go to this place, but I think we just totally teed it up so juicy that I have to do it, which is like, I think there is a conflict then as we're talking about these leaders who are running these companies and that narrative that gets so big. There's such a push-pull between, well, do I sell myself as a person? Like, do I sell Dave as we're pushing into the business velocity work and the 5 facets work? Like, because people want to connect with a person and they want to connect with someone, and your business can have a personality as well. Like they can connect with that too, but it is a team. It is a journey. Like I feel bad when it gets pointed directly at me because I'm like, yeah, but also these people, like also there's more. It's not just me. Like I resist it all the time to self-promote because it feels weird to me. Like it feels unnatural. Yeah. And I can get the logic behind the argument, but how do you coach people through that? Like how do you support folks in that in that space of, all right, well, how do you honor the team, the business, and the work, and at the same time have a personal brand? Like, there's tension there to me.
There is tension, and I get it too, especially a lot of personal. And I know you said that we were going to go here, but personal brand and company brand. A lot of times people are like, oh, they're completely separate, but a lot of times they're definitely intrinsically connected. And there's companies that are like, oh, don't put your face on it because you're never going to be able to sell it and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, is that your goal, right? So I
Mhm.
think, hold on, first back up for a second. It's like, is there going to be some, do you don't have to know if you're going to sell your business, if you need to be the face of it. But what I would say is, um, you still can, and it happens all the time. But one of the things that we always do with leaders who are really care deeply about the fact that their team is heavily involved and they are the face of the company, and they're, maybe a little weary about being the face of the company because they are either going to sell or they have a huge team behind them that's making literally everything work behind the scenes without them. And I would say that's a company culture thing that you can breathe into your personal brand. You do not have to have it just be the Dave show, right? This
Yeah.
is a perfect example. This podcast is not just Dave talking to a guest. He's got Dave and you've got Hannah. So Hannah is, and I agree. Like, Hannah works with us too, and she keeps the wheels on the bus quite literally. And so
Mhm.
it's like you and Hannah are doing this thing together. It's not just the Dave show.
Yep.
And
And
then,
Katie and Chris and
yeah, exactly.
everyone who helps us
And
pull this
all
thing
of
together.
the other every other person who's, making
I,
everything work.
I will candidly say I have the easiest role of anybody in the
Yeah.
podcast. Like, I show up for the hour and then maybe I post on LinkedIn at one point in time. But other than that, like, all the work happens from other people. Like, Hannah does a good job driving it. Katie does all the stewardship. Chris does all the production. And I mean, it's like, it's a team that makes this thing happen, to your point. So it's like, but I also think that's what small businesses are, right? It's
Yeah.
like, you mentioned this at the outset, even in the very beginning, introducing yourself, of like wanting to get we talked about the obstacles, right? Like wanting to get yourself out of the weeds sometimes. And it's like, there is something too intrinsic about being, the founder of the company, or whatever your CEO, your title is, like the kind of in that C-suite space of like, you feel responsible for everything. Like
Mhm.
everything, like I think the weight of, is this working or not?
Mhm.
Like, is this going to work, and is this going to sustain itself? And you have to carry the anxiety of the future of like, yeah, it's working now, but like, what about 6 months from now? About a year from now? Like, is this thing going to crumble, and am I going to disappoint all these people? And am I going to have to tell these people that this doesn't work anymore? And you can run that narrative, but it's like, the more you actually, I think, at least in my experience, the more I've learned to let go, and I'm not terribly great at it either, but the more I've learned to let go, the more it's like, oh, it works better. It's just better.
Yes.
I'm not like in everything. Like, the podcast works because I'm not involved in every aspect of it, because the people who are talented and good at it are doing it.
Well,
Right.
and
Agree.
I'll speak from the other side of the table. So the thing that I appreciate and want from both of you guys is direction. I know that I offer like the role that I play, like the support, the builder, the doer of the thing or whatever. But what I want from the both of you is like, here are the things I could build next. Tell me which one you want. And like, you guys own the strategy, you guys own the vision, and then we own the operations and whatever, to way oversimplify it. But that's the gift that we give each other. Like, it's a relief for me to not be the one making the decision about the direction and the strategy. And it is a relief to you to not be the one operationalizing everything. And I
Yeah.
think that's the beautiful, symbiotic relationship that a team brings together. And I totally agree that it is very important to make your brand reflect that entire ecosystem as best you can.
Yeah.
Um,
Any chance you can fold those folks into it, whether you're a personal brand or a company, um, the more transparent you can be about introducing those team members up front. Like, hey, I am on sales calls. I'm like, you're talking to me right now, but I just want you to know that this machine cannot run without this person, this person, this person. We're going to spend a lot of time together now, but then you're going to spend so much time with this person and this person. And I successfully tee up every other person so that they aren't so attached to me, right? They're like, oh, Jena is a facet of this whole engagement. She's the first, the clock is on 1 right now, and then it's going to go to 2 and 3 and 4. And so I think, bringing those people in early and introducing them and making sure that people know, hey, it's me right now, but you're going to be talking to Hannah. She's going to be just as involved, or, Katie or whoever else. So yeah, like that's, I think, the biggest thing. And that's a company culture thing and a values thing too. So I think that's what makes business leaders like that very special, who want it to be more than just them. They really truly want to be a leader and not just an ego, glory, flag, trophy, torch, whatever holder that you have, trophy chaser. It's like, we want to have, community and togetherness, not only with our network, but like our internal folks. So,
Well, Jena, you are an amazing example of it. A genuinely good human, great leader, good friend. We will always be in your corner, and I know hopefully likewise. But sadly, we have to end this conversation. This felt really great. Like, this was one of my favorites so far, for sure. And really just appreciate all you offered. So the last thing we like to do is just say, all right, how do people find you?
We're on Instagram if you like that sort of thing at blush.cactus. And then our website is just blushcactus.com. The color blush, BLUSH, and then the word cactus.com, all one word. That's where you can find us.
And they just rebranded and redesigned their website, and it is beautiful.
And I'm also on LinkedIn as Jena Davis Gribble, because I had a previous anyway, Jena Gribble. Search it, I'll come up.
Yeah. In the show notes, we'll post all those things, and when we put it on LinkedIn, we'll post all those things. So
perfect.
If you're interested, you can find those links. But thank you so much. We're going to wrap. Really appreciate you being here, and as always, for a wonderful conversation.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jena.
Let's have her back and then do a 5-part series on how to run an agency. We'll divide it into like the 5 facets, and we'll talk about each one.
Yeah. It's interesting. We work with a lot of agencies in various forms, right? There's marketing agencies, kind of like Amazon marketing agencies that do all sorts of different things. And I think it is one of those businesses that is really difficult to scale and run, because it's very, kind of people dependent, right? Like, you need good people who can do good work often. And so I know with the complexities of all the things that, come with an agency, Jena has always done such a good job of just being like leading humanly first and agency second. But I think that's part of the success. And I think that shows up in just how she leads and how successful her company has been, and how easy it is to say, oh, you should work with my friend Jena.
Absolutely. It is that balance. It is that balance of people and process. 100%. 100%.
99. I'm just kidding. 100%. Totally.
The balance of people and process. So valuable. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Business Velocity. And today's insights are just the beginning of enhancing your business's momentum. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can also check out our framework on the 5S at theevolvedifference.com. And remember, the time is now to take these strategies, apply your learning, and achieve velocity. Dave, so great to see you again.
As always, so great.
See you later.
See you later.